Good afternoon, and welcome to our Oak Bend Medical Center Happy Hour podcast. My name is Donna, and I am your host. I'm very excited to introduce our guest today as we speak about estate planning, living wills, and durable power of attorneys. Benecia Flores joined the Petrosewicz Law Firm on March 1st, 2017, and has over 23 years of experience helping the elderly and disabled citizens of Texas obtain long-term Medicaid benefits. Prior to the pandemic, Benecia regularly presented on the topics of estate planning and Medicaid eligibility for the various financial advisors, nonprofit organizations, support groups, and the Chamber of Commerce. Good afternoon, Benecia, and welcome to our podcast.
Hi, Donna. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
And it's a pleasure to have you because we hear things of estate planning and powers of attorney and living wills. And in our younger years, we feel like we have a whole lifetime to prepare for that. In our older years, we don't want to face it. So it's like, okay, I have tomorrow. But I think what COVID has woke us up about is time is precious. Mm-hmm. And time, there's no time to waste. If you love your loved ones, you want to have things in place. And you want to have things in place for you. So what exactly is estate planning? And when should someone consider starting that?
Right. Yeah, sure. Well, in plain English, estate planning is the process of arranging your affairs in case something happens to you and you can't act for yourself anymore. So essentially, estate planning is planning for death and disability. And it involves getting documents in place like a will, sometimes a trust, a power of attorney, medical power of attorney, a living will, a designation of a guardian of your minor children, or if you have an adult child with disabilities, then you can put a guardianship in place for your adult child as well. And a good estate plan also involves coordinating your beneficiary designations, because your beneficiary designations are going to supersede the legal documents you put in place. Now, estate planning is not just for the wealthy. Unfortunately, in Texas, the death rate is 100%. So no matter how much money you have or don't have, eventually we all have to face this reality. And even if we don't want to think about dying, it's not going to stop it from happening. And on top of that, more and more people are becoming incapacitated and live a very long time before they die. So as far as when should someone consider putting an estate plan in place, everybody 18 years or older should have an estate plan. Did you know that you cannot get information about your college-aged child just because you are their parent? Once a child turns 18, the child must give you permission to get medical information. I like to tell people that effectively births, deaths, marriages, divorces, these are the life events that should trigger either getting an estate plan, or if you already have an estate plan, reviewing it to make sure that it's current. And if you have minor children, you very much need an estate plan in place.
So one question I had was, what was the purpose of estate planning? But I guess the question also becomes, what happens if something happens and I don't have an estate plan?
Oh, sure. So the purpose of estate planning, two things come to mind for me. Number one, you want to communicate your wishes when you no longer have the capability to communicate those wishes yourself. And, two, I see it as an act of love to your loved ones. You want to arrange your affairs beforehand and save your family from having to try to figure out what to do at a time that is a very difficult time for them. So if you die, your family is going to be mourning, and your surviving family, they have to work. They've got to continue on with life. If you have minor children, well, your spouse is going to be comforting your minor children. And so to add on top of that, not having your affairs in order just adds so much burden to your family. So that's just something you don't want to do to them. So what happens if you don't have one in place? Well, the state of Texas has one for you. It may not be what you want, but if you don't have a will, then the state, there are laws, intestacy laws are what they are called, that say what happened to your assets and how they're distributed. And that may not be the way that you want it to go. Did you know, for example, that if you and your spouse own a home together and your spouse has children from a prior marriage, if your spouse dies and they do not have a will, that you will own that home with your spouse's children? And that's crazy. And people
That
don't realize.
is.
Yeah. So it's very important to communicate your wishes and make sure that things are going to flow the way you want them to flow.
So I think, and I'm going to put you on the spot here, and I know you can't tell us everyone is different,
Sure.
but I think a lot of people think I can't afford to do this. Oh my God, it's so expensive. And what am I going to do? What is a cost range, maybe? I don't know how to get you to answer this, but I think we have to afford the things we need to afford. So
You do. And times are tough. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to give you a typical attorney answer of it depends. But because the cost is going to vary based on the complexity of the situation. And quite frankly, which attorney you use. Different attorneys charge different fees. So I encourage people to shop around and call, their attorney and see what's a good fit for them. However, when you think about it this way, estate planning, it's inexpensive in terms of what it protects. So what we're protecting when you put an estate plan in place is you're putting a protection against the wrong person being in charge of your minor child's inheritance. You are protecting against your spouse cutting out your children from a prior marriage if you have them. You die, your spouse inherits all of your money. If they change their plan and cut out your children from a prior marriage, that's a possibility if you don't have an estate plan. You're also protecting against the higher cost of probating an estate when there is no will. Other things like you're protecting against paying more in income tax when beneficiary designations are not filled out correctly. Or in some rare cases, you may be having to pay more in estate taxes. By not having powers of attorney, if you have a plan in place, you're protecting against having to get a guardianship over you. So I realize that times are tough. People have to prioritize what they can afford and what they can't. However, we do routinely see people spend more money and effort in planning for vacations and in who will care for their minor children if they die. It's an important thing.
absolutely. And I think it's one, like anything else, we really need to put it more as a priority and make sure that we get these things in place. So you hear a lot about living wills.
Yes.
Why would I need one of those?
A living will, it's a legal document and is also called an advance directive, or you might see it called a directive to physicians. But basically, it's the document where you state your wishes for how much and what kind of medical care you want when you're expected to die. In other words, do you want to be kept alive using all available life-sustaining treatment, or do you want to be kept comfortable and be allowed to die as gently as possible? The form as well, you can add additional instructions if you have any other preferences for your medical care. Now, the document is only effective when you cannot make your own decisions. So if you can make your own decisions, then you and not the form will say what happens. And we find that people like having a living will in place because then they're documenting what they want and the family member doesn't have to make that decision during a really difficult time.
Benecia, I've had to make that decision without a living will in place.
Oh.
And for my kids, I will make sure that I have one.
Yes.
It is not a position you want to put anyone in.
That's right.
It is a very hard decision. So I encourage everyone. So where can someone get living wills at?
Well, there are do-it-yourself forms on the internet. However, just to give you an example, in Texas, you can perform your own appendectomy. You can do your own will. The equivalent of going online and doing your own estate plan and not using an attorney to help you with that is basically going on the internet to diagnose and treat yourself for cancer. Now, I may be a bit dramatic in my examples, but there are risks in doing it yourself. The risks are that you may not fill out the form correctly. you may not sign it correctly. And if it's not done correctly, it may not be valid at all. And we see this regularly where people bring forms from the internet and sometimes it's as if they didn't have anything at all. So I will always recommend, if you want these documents, to seek the advice of an attorney, and not just any attorney, but you really want somebody who specializes in the area of estate planning to prepare an estate plan. I can't stress this enough, but I feel that especially if you have a blended family or beneficiaries who are either minors or disabled or on government benefits like Medicaid, or if you have beneficiaries on drugs or who are bad with money, you really want to see somebody who specializes in this area to give you good advice on what to do, because all of that cannot be effectively done on the internet, in my opinion.
That is great advice. And the internet can guide us in a lot of ways. But when it comes to life and death decisions, we probably need to go to the experts.
Yes.
Is a living will the same as a durable power of attorney?
No. A durable power of attorney is used to designate somebody to make your financial decisions. And a durable power of attorney, you can customize how much power you want to give that person. So you can give them wide authority to handle your financial affairs, or you can narrow that authority a little bit more. An example would be, do you want to give that person the power to create a trust for you or make gifts for you? So a durable power of attorney has to do with financial decisions. A living will, on the other hand, as we talked about earlier, you're just recording your preferences for the medical treatment when you are expected to die.
So with a durable power of attorney, and let's say I die, when does that durable power of attorney end?
It ends at your death. As a matter of fact, you take it with you. They say you can't take it with you, but you can take your power of attorney is only effective while you're alive. When you die, it's no longer, your family can no longer use it to help you.
And this is a real good point, because I think people sometimes put provisions in their bank account or something to pay for their funeral or other things.
Yes. Now, if a person has a joint bank account with their daughter, for example, and the daughter can still access the account after death to pay the funeral, that's one thing. But if a mother is expecting her daughter to use the power of attorney to access the bank and pay the funeral, that may not work. So all these little nuances, I feel, are what a good estate planning attorney can help you sort through.
If you have a durable power of attorney and you don't think that they're properly taking care of the loved one or a living will, what can other family members do?
Great question. All reports of incidences or abuse or neglect, exploitation should be made to Adult Protective Services and the police. Matter of fact, there is a Texas law that requires anybody and everybody with cause to believe that if an elderly or disabled person is being abused, neglected, or exploited, you must report that to the authorities. And failure to do so is actually a Class A misdemeanor. So it's very important that be reported to protect that person who's being abused, neglected, or exploited. There are attorneys that specialize in fiduciary litigation. And I know I'm not speaking English now, I'm speaking legalese, but there are attorneys that specialize in suing people that are acting incorrectly as a power of attorney or an executor. And that's the area of fiduciary litigation. So it may warrant contacting an attorney to sort through that. Now, if the loved one still has capacity to sign legal documents, then you can always revoke your power of attorney and execute a new one. So if you sign a power of attorney and you've given it to your child number one, but child number one is no longer behaving in a way that you would like, you absolutely can change your power of attorney. These documents are not set in stone. They can always be revised as long as you are in your right mind and can do so. Now, if the person no longer has capacity and they cannot sign their new documents, that may be an issue where a guardianship may be appropriate. And that's a totally separate, guardianship is a totally separate deal. Guardianship is having to go to court, having a court say that you are no longer incapacitated and you can't handle your affairs. And it's a very public proceeding and it's expensive. So you want to avoid that at all costs.
So it kind of sounds like just like insurance or medical care or whatever, this is just as important to make sure that we have in place, especially if we have children, any property, married,
yes,
or anything. Where are y'all located?
We are located at 121 FM 359 in Richmond, Texas. We're basically at 359 and 90.
Oh, okay. Okay, so you're local. And someone could just call and make an appointment to see y'all?
Yes, absolutely. That'd probably be the best way. But you can also go to our website, and we have questionnaires. Our questionnaires are on our website, our client questionnaires, as well as you can contact us via website as well.
That would be awesome. And what is the website?
www.petrolaw.biz. That's PETROLAW.biz.
We will also post this on our website so people can contact. So the one thing I encourage our listeners to do is please take care of this. During COVID, we saw a lot of people that we never expected for them to leave us anytime soon. Oh. And we don't ever want to be caught in that place again.
Right.
Benecia, is there anything else you'd like to tell us?
Well, gosh, no, I feel like I've talked a lot. I can't think of anything per se, but if anybody has questions, contact us, or if you have an attorney that you work with, the better thing is to ask than to wonder. So don't ever hesitate to ask somebody if you have questions. There is no stupid question. People need to get answers for what they want to know.
I agree. Let's all do our part and make sure that we have taken care of our family in every way we can. I want to thank you for joining us today. I would like to have you back on at further days. And a big thank you to our listeners for tuning in. Beginning now, set an intention and a relentless focus on living your life as the greatest person you can be in all situations. Please join us next week.
Thank you for joining us today on Oak Bend Medical Center Happy Hour podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's broadcast and invite you to email us at oakbendhappyhourpodcast@obmc.org with any questions or topics that you would like for us to cover. Remember, you can find us here each Friday at 5. Until next week, be mindful and stay healthy.